Hello and welcome to Nanapod, a podcast dedicated to the fantastic manga written by A. Yazawa. I'm Crystal, and I'm joined by my best girl Kirsten as we dissect this manga, discussing everything from the emotions, the cultural impact, as well as any headcanons that might be floating around in our brains. With this podcast, we hope to preserve a shoujo staple that sadly hasn't been talked about in a very long time. So come with us. We're waiting for you in apartment 707. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Nanapod. So we are picking up here in volume 18. And let's see, the front part says the story of Nana, because, we have to read that part here. It says, Nana Hachi Komatsu and Nana Osaki meet by chance on a train headed for Tokyo. Their personalities and the environments they grew up in are very different, but by fate or by chance, they meet again and become roommates. As the new year approaches, Trapnest goes to England to record, while Blast prepares for a Christmas Eve thank you party for their fan club. On the guest list is Misato Uehara from Osaka. When the other Misato, Mai, finds out, she tries to keep Nana and Misato from meeting, but they do see each other at the party, and Yasu starts to realize that the two girls are related. Around the same time, Kurata, a photographer from Weekly Search, pays a visit to Hachi and tells her that Nana's mother is still alive. Provoked by Kurata, Hachi departs on a mission to Osaka, but Nana's mother, Misuzu, denies that Nana is her daughter. When Search publishes an article about the Uehara family, Misuzu disappears again. Of course, Hachi reads the magazine article. Realizing how Nana must be feeling, Hachi insists she'll stay with Nana till Ren returns. The new year comes, and Blast is doing great, but... ... And we open up on chapter 66. The narration says, "The key to your whereabouts, which I couldn't find no matter how hard I looked, is finally in my hands, now that I've stopped searching. Miss Hachi, will you let me open the door?" And now I think we are switching narration to Nana. It says, "Any place was fine with me, as long as I could see the sea." And now we do open up with Nana that is much older and her hair is long, and there's a splash of the waves. And now we are catapulted all the way back into apartment 707, still in the future times. And they are looking at the pictures that Kurata sent. And Hachi and Nobu say, "England?" And Yasu says, "Well, we don't know that for sure." You can hear a man's voice in the background while Nana's singing. He probably works there. They listen to the tape. And Nobu says, "Yeah." And Shin says he's speaking British English. And Hachi and Nobu say, "British English?" And Shin says, "British people speak a totally different kind of English than Americans." And Hachi says, "Really? I didn't know that." And Nobu says, "I'm amazed you can tell the difference. Or are we just stupid?" And Shin says, "Well, I speak British English, but with a bit of a Swedish accent." And Hachi goes, "Oh!" And Nobu goes, "Sure." And then Shin goes on to say, "I think there's a good chance Nana's in England." And Yasu says, "Just because there's a British accent on the tape doesn't mean she's in England." Which, that's true because while we are talking about it, there are several different dialects within the British Isles. So depending on the dialect, and yeah, British English, with an accent, But there's several different dialects. I wonder if it even says that in the OG translation or if it's more succinct, you know? And Shin says, but think about it. Most people wouldn't move to a country they know nothing about. Nana was so influenced by British punk, like the Sex Pistols and Vivienne Westwood. She probably heard lots of stories from Ren, too. And then the others are just kind of looking blank. And then Hachi says, I bet she's in England, too. And Nobu says, then let's investigate to see if this pub in England really exists. It's got to be easier than hunting her down. And Shin says, England's a big country. It won't be easy. It's not that big, Shin. Like, in comparison to the US, but, you know. Um, and then he's like, give me a smoke. And, you know, Yasu, he's of age now, so, he's like, yeah. So he's giving Shin a cigarette, and he's like, let's start with seaside towns. And then Shin says, but England's surrounded by water. There's a million towns like that. And then Yasu's like, yeah. And Hachi says, but at least now we have a clue. And Nobu says, yeah, and ... At least we know Nana's alive. And then Hachi looks over at him, and everyone looks real sad. And now there's narration. It says, I can die whenever I want, as long as I know the sea's nearby. It takes the edge off, and I can live for another day. Which, yeah. And now there's music going on as Hachi is washing the dishes. And she is now remembering the time when she first saw Nana sing for the very first time in apartment 707. And she's remembering when she says, as long as I play guitar, I'll be happy with you singing. That's what Nobu said. And now she's thinking, I love that song. It's the best song in the world. And she's thinking about the time that Nobu told her, I'm in love with you. And she comes into the room where Nobu was playing his guitar, and he looks up at her, and she smiles, and then he smiles, and he's like, I have to play it sometimes. Her guitar must be lonely without her. And Hachi smiles and sits down on the bed next to him with a plop. And then he looks over at her, and she looks over at him, and then he looks kind of like, should you be sitting this close? And then he's like, should you be leaving your kid alone? It's pretty late. And she's like, what? And he says, don't worry about me. Go home. And she's like, Satsuki's fine. She's been visiting her grandparents since New Year's. And he's like, oh? Just Satsuki? And then Hachi says, I was really busy doing people's kimonos during New Year's, so I couldn't watch. Oh, you're helping dress people in kimonos too? You're busy. And she's like, what about you, Nobu? It's winter break. The hotel must be busy. There's a lot of busies in that. I guess they are having awkward conversation, aren't they? Where they're like, I'm busy. Yeah, you sound really busy. Oh, are you busy? Yeah. Oh, man. And he says, yeah, but Dad's fine now. He complains about everything I do. He treats me like I'm in the way. I don't know if he'd rather me take over the biz or get lost. And now she's laughing. And she's like, is Club Biz booming? And he says, yeah, Hart. There's a lot of musicians in my hometown now. Lots of talented young punks. It's fun. It's meaningful work. I like it more than just running the hotel. And she's like, I'm sure 2 great bands in music history came out of your town. That's a big deal for kids. Kids who worship Blast and Trap Nest are old enough now to start their own bands and play shows. When I think about that, it makes me feel so old. And he's like, well, if that's true, then what we did wasn't for nothing. And now she just kind of opens up her eyes, and they're kind of glazed over and glossy. And then he's like, I'm just happy to see all these kids getting into music. And she smiles at him and is thinking, one more day, I'll do my best for one more day and keep on living this life. And now she has leaned her head against Nobu's shoulder like it's the most natural thing in the world. And then he's like, what about Ren? And now she opens her eyes, and he's like, is he all right on his own? And she's like, yeah, he's in England again. And he looks over at him and he says, over at Takumi's place. And she looks over at him with like a, yeah, of course. And then he's just like, oh. And he's like, I haven't seen him at all. He didn't come to last year's fireworks festival either. She's like, he's doing fine. And he's like, is he playing guitar? And she smiles and says, that's all he does. All right, guys. So if you don't know, you're going to want to skip like the next 3 minutes or so. When I first read this, I thought they were talking about Hanjo, Ren Hanjo. So imagine my surprise when I found out later that they were not. But I think that's kind of the point. It's meant to be vague. It's meant to make you go, oh, okay, like Nana's disappeared for some really sad reason, you know, like maybe they broke up and stuff. But Ren's clearly, like, around. He's just hanging out with Takumi. And apparently, like, Hachi is watching over him in some capacity. Like, is she also mothering him? You know? Because we didn't know. So, we have a scene change. And there's a vroom in the fancy car. And Yasu says, so you're starring in another rom-com this spring? Good on ya. And he says, yeah, but I'd rather play some weirdo in an indie flick. I'm swamped now. And Yasu says, boo-hoo. You should just be glad they let you back in the biz. Man, my head's cold. Because the top is down and he's not wearing a hat. And Shin says, I know. It's the only way I can make a living. I'm working hard, doing my best. And Yasu is smiling. And I would like to point out that this, like, is the most we've seen Yasu's eyes. Like, in this panel we see his eyes. We see his eyes in the top panel here. And when they were talking about Nana earlier, and he looked real sad, we could see his eyes. And we could see, yeah, it's like four or five panels where we actually get to see Yasu's eyes. And that's not normal. So I do know that in the future he's still with Miu. So I think she's maybe made it a little easier for him to be slightly more transparent with his emotions. Even though I think he's always been pretty transparent, but like more so. That's just my opinion. And then he says, how's Misato doing? And it says, good. She wants to see everyone. It's like, you should have brought her over with you. He's like, yeah, but Misato's busier than I am. I'm sure she's just being polite. He's like, you think so? She overloaded my schedule even more than Jin did. I can't win. And Yasu laughs and says, that's our Misato. And now he's like, by the way, Misato said whoever left the tape and photos in the mailbox must be a member of the paparazzi still hunting down Nana. And you know what? I don't actually know if they're talking about faux Misato or Mai. Like, I actually don't know. Because I don't think we ever really find out. And I don't have any clues right now on this reread. So, it could be either of them. It really could. Because years have gone by. And then Shin says they're high-res photos taken with a hidden camera with a telephone lens. And normal people these days wouldn't use such lo-fi sound equipment to record anything. But reporters still use tape recorders on assignment. They're stuck in the Stone Age. And Yasu says, well, I wondered about that too. But if you're a reporter, this is a big break. Why would they tell Nana instead of going public? And he's like, you're right, says Shin. Then who did it? If we can figure that out, then maybe we can find her. And Yasu says, there's no way to know unless the person comes forward. All we can do is just look for that pub. And Shin says, but if she's singing in public without a work visa, maybe she'll end up getting deported? Heart? We won't need to look for her then. And then Yasu's like, well, I hope we get a hold of her before something like that happens. And then Shin just looks contemplative and is like, Hachi thinks Ren secretly put that stuff in her mailbox. And Yasu looks over with like these really wide eyes, like, what? And then Shin just has this smile. He's like, as a Christmas present, heart, because there's no chimney. And then Yasu's like, maybe. And he looks down and Shin looks over at him like, did I overstep my bounds? You know, because like he's making a joke. But it bothers Yasu, you know. And then he's just looking forward. It's like the next song was a huge hit back in 2001, Trap Nest. And it's Rira who's singing one of these old songs. And Shin looks sad, and it's the song Trust. And now it's Nana's narration that says, hey Hachi, I came here looking for a place to die. So why am I still here? Because suicide is hard, girly. Like, it just is. And now there's a zoom of a plane overhead, and we are whoosh, back in the past. With Ren, and he's smoking his 7 stars and going to room 601, and he opens the door with a click and a creak, and then he comes in and he's looking around and he looks on the table and there's a whole bunch of Jump magazines with a note, and it's from Nana, and it's a little drawn thing, and it says, welcome home, I made miso soup. And there's a picture of her like a cat, and it says naked under the apron with a heart. It says from the wifey. And he just smiles. And now we are going to Yokohama Arena, and Nana and Nobu are like, whoa, wow, it's huge. And Nobu's got the stupid star eyes. And now they are very happy. They're like, eek, eek, yay! And Yasu's like, do I know those weirdos? Grow up, you freaks. And Fomasato is laughing. And now one of their manager man is like, is everyone here? Let's start the rehearsal. And Fomasato says, sorry, she's not here yet. And he says, what? Where the hell? Oh, Shin's not here yet. And the guy says, what? Where the hell is he? I had the set constructed early so you guys could start rehearsing yesterday. And Jin says, we still have 15 more minutes, Matsuo. Don't worry, heart. And then Fomasato says, he said he left home half an hour ago. And then Jin is like, oh no, then you know he's going to be late. And Yasu looks over and says, home? Question mark. And Fomasato looks over at him like, yeah. And now it's the female handler, and she says, congratulations. And Rira says, you must be tired too, Mari. And she says, no, it was fine. It's going to be the best album ever. And Rira says, yeah? Thanks for everything. And then Mari says, oh yeah, I know you won't forget, but Blast is playing tomorrow at Yokohama Arena. I'll come get you at 4 so we don't have to rush around. And then she leaves, slams the door, and now Rira is just like, oh no, she's got that oh no face. Because she's thinking about Shin saying, forget about it. And then thinking about Yasu said, what if you said, don't go? You're going away, right? And that was in the the long time ago when he was asking her not to leave for Tokyo. And she's also thinking about Ren, who was like, no matter who you fell in love with, you just couldn't give up. And now it's Takumi, and he's like, honey, I'm home, heart. And she's like, who are you? Because he's been gone for a hot minute. And then he's got the dots, and he's like, why are you mad? And she says, I'm mad because you're so insensitive. You don't even know why I'm mad at you. It's because he didn't call her the whole time he was away. But Hachi, he's just not that kind of guy. You know this about him. But anyway, we're ending with Nana's narration saying, hey Hachi, when the salty air surrounds me, the sound of the waves beckons sweetly. But you saved my life. How can I throw it away? And that is the end of the chapter, guys. Thank you so much for joining me for this one. Like, comment, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, I will see you all in the next one. Good night.